All right, good evening, and welcome to our special council meeting, 6 o'clock. And I want to welcome obviously council administration, and we do have our delegation that will be bringing forward a report on our community safety and well-being plan. And so with that, members of council, all members are present. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest on the agenda is presented to you this afternoon. I see no indications, so that we'll certainly have that reflected in the minutes of the meeting. And so we'll go right to the delegations, and I'm pleased to welcome this evening Leonardo Gill, Project Manager for Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan for the county, our Chief Administrative Officer, Rob Masonville, and our Director of Council and Community Services, Mary Birch. Welcome all three.
Thank you. So I believe we'll be, oh, there we go. We're just putting up the slides there. So thank you once again. Good evening, members of council. Thank you for having me here this evening. My name is Leonardo Gill, and I am the project manager for the Regional Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. For those who may not know me, my career has been primarily focused on asset-based community development. Prior to my work on this project, I've worked alongside residents in a coordinating capacity with two neighborhood renewal organizations within Windsor. I've also had the pleasure of being the social investment data and research analyst for Pathway to Potential and the social policy and planning department at the City of Windsor. I'm joined here today by Ms. Mary Birch, Director of Council and Community Services for the County of Essex. Ms. Birch is a core team member for the project and the designate for co-chair Rob Masonville. Mr. Masonville sends his regrets on not being able to attend this evening. Ms. Birch and I will be able to answer any questions at the end of the presentation. So as per the request of the regional CAO's table, and in an effort to ensure that all elected officials within the region have a fulsome understanding of this provincially mandated project, I'm here today to bring you all up to speed on its current status. Next slide, please. So today I'll be providing you all with three takeaways, starting with a bit of background information to contextualize the project and the planning framework being used. We'll then move into discussing key updates since the July 13th City of Windsor Council report. And finally, I'll conclude with a breakdown of the project methodologies and timelines. Next slide, please. But before I jump into the legislative mandate, I wanted to provide a bit of context. In the early 2000s, across the province, new approaches in policing that focused on community mobilization and crime prevention were starting to be emphasized. These new approaches were born out of provincial data that indicated that while crime was trending downwards, social disorder calls were trending upwards. Or in other words, safety challenges were changing. Police and first responders were now responding to calls that involved symptoms of larger, complex social issues like homelessness, like mental wellness, substance use, and poverty, for instance. This changing trend led to the creation of the following three booklets that you have that you see on the screen that essentially established the rationale for the current legislation. The first booklet detailed crime trends in Ontario and presented the case for communities to engage in upstream activities or activities that were related to crime prevention and social development. These approaches focused on things like strengthening communities, reducing opportunities for crime, and early intervention. This booklet also emphasized the importance and impact of risk and protective factors. The second booklet in 2014 consisted of the results of consultations with multiple sectors across the province. The consultations essentially emphasized the need for greater cross-sector collaboration, and ultimately this led to the creation of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Framework, which I'll discuss in a minute. The last booklet is essentially a how-to planning guide on establishing these CSWB plans. So it does provide some recommendations, provide some opportunities and some strategies to use during the planning process. Next slide, please. So when we consider this context, in 2018, after almost a decade of those consultations, that data analysis of crime and social disorder trends, amendments were made to modernize the Police Services Act with the goal of moving away from solely incident response to more preventative and proactive practices. The amendments led to the mandate that all municipalities prepare and adopt community safety and well-being plans. And at the time, the deadline established for submission and adoption of those plans was January 1st, 2021. However, of course, due to the pandemic, things changed. Legislation was passed to extend the submission deadline. And as of today, a new date has yet to be established by the province. As for the requirements of the plan, the CSWB planning framework provided by the province includes the need to establish a multi-sectoral advisory committee of at least 7 key sectors. Those sectors are health and mental health, education, community and social services, community and social services for youth, custodial services for youth, municipalities, and police services or detachment commanders. In our context, we've created a leadership table based of 9 key sectors, including business and public safety, which is comprised of fire, EMS, and police services. The second key point here is that public consultations efforts would need to occur, and that these consultations happen with key communities and groups. Overall, the plan must identify priority risk factors, identify strategies to reduce said risk factors, and have outcome indicators to measure the success of established strategies. Something to note here as well is that flexibility was given in the legislation as to how municipalities and regions should go about developing these plans. Some regions, some municipalities are establishing priorities for their entire region, others solely for individual municipalities, while others still were doing a bit of a hybrid approach, regional collaboration with appendices for each municipality. In our context and through discussions with the county, it made most sense to undertake that hybrid approach and develop the plan in collaboration with regional municipalities, but include appendices for each municipality. This was also in an effort to really reduce the need for duplicate advisory committees that would likely include the same people at each table. As in each of these sectors, we do have regional organizations. Next slide, please. So when we discuss community safety and well-being, what that planning process is truly about is creating an integrated approach to service delivery that involves multi-sector collaborations and is focused on proactively enhancing or developing evidence-based strategies. All of this is for the goal of addressing local priorities like risk factors or vulnerabilities related to crime and complex social issues. Overall, this approach recognizes that the feeling of community safety and well-being goes beyond the incidence of crime. Or in other words, there are factors that influence one's perception of whether a community feels safe or not, regardless of whether a crime has occurred. This can be things like stigma, blighted buildings, even a poverty of opportunities in the community. Connected to the second point on the slide there is that for every risk, there is a community strength, asset, and protective factor. And this really should be our building blocks. This should be our starting block. So as important as it is to identify risk factors or vulnerabilities, we must also ensure that we're identifying and building upon the strengths and assets that exist within our communities. Currently, there are phenomenal partnerships that cut across multiple sectors, and leveraging these types of partnerships and committees is a critical success factor. We really should not be considering or trying to build everything from the ground up, especially when we know that there are these existing committees, these existing projects that are available that we can work with. Something also to include here is that community members are facing challenges to their safety, health, and well-being that are complex and systemic. And when we consider the challenges that our residents may be facing, they likely intersect with other social challenges. And if you consider that again from a resource standpoint or a resource perspective, they likely cut across different sectors and funding portfolios. So in that regard, all sectors and all members of the community have a role to play in establishing and developing strategies to confront these challenges. And as such, as many groups and people as possible should be consulted. And finally, and most importantly, really, the strategies must be culturally responsive. This must be a process that gives consideration to social and historical context, as well as power imbalances. And as such, it means that we must start with the intent of having meaningful dialogue with individuals and groups from diverse backgrounds. Next slide, please. The vision for community safety and well-being in Windsor-Essex County was defined by our regional systems leadership table as a community where everyone feels safe, has a sense of belonging, equitable access to services and opportunities, and can have their needs met across Windsor and Essex County. And you'll notice that in that definition, it includes many of the elements that we had just discussed, as well as some elements that I'll discuss currently with respect to the CSWB framework. Next slide, please. And so this is the framework in pictorial form. Really, the framework identifies 4 key areas of intervention. We can intervene through that top layer, the green layer of social development, another layer of prevention, risk intervention, and incident response. To explain this framework, I'll start off with the red dot in the middle, the bullseye there, incident response, because commonly when we think of safety interventions, we focus primarily at the center of that bullseye at the incident itself. And we tend to approach it from a policing, fire, or emergency services perspective. But again, as stated previously, research is showing that more and more often, police and emergency services are responding to situations related to well-being that are symptoms of larger issues, whether it be something related to a mental health crisis or even housing insecurity. And if we're understanding that context, despite how well-trained our first responders are across the region, these issues are some that can't be solved alone. And so again, that's why we're looking to see how we can collaborate on some of these aspects. If we move a level up to risk intervention, that yellow level, that layer above focuses on reducing harm before it becomes a critical or non-critical incident. And these are situations that are called acutely elevated risks, or situations where if action does not occur or doesn't happen, an individual will likely lead to individual harm to oneself or to others. And this is the type of work that is really being done by groups like Situation Tables across the province, and even the Situation Table here in Windsor-Essex. And usually will involve partnerships between city departments, healthcare, public safety, and community partners. If we move a level above that to prevention, this is about proactively identifying and addressing local risks before they escalate. Prevention really necessitates the need of involving all people regardless of their expertise. And to break that down a little bit, to think of it in a different way, people living in neighborhoods or communities will be the first to notice when a change, positive or negative, occurs in the area, because they're in tune with their environments, and therefore they're the best resource to kind of find those protective factors, those assets to meet that change. Again, once we move up to that to the top level again in terms of social development, this is about long-term investment, really to try to improve what are called the social determinants of health and well-being. These are underlying conditions shaping life, things like access to income, education, job security, quality housing, etc. And really involves us looking beyond the incident itself at the social causes and understanding that those causes need integrated and collective responses. So to bring this together, if we start at the top by building on those protective factors in strengths and focus on improving those social determinants of health and well-being by emphasizing prevention and risk mitigation strategies through the use of data and evidence-based practice, then we can hope to reduce the number of critical incidents that need to be responded to. That, in a nutshell, is what this framework is about. Again, focusing on those upstream activities. So for your reference, I've included my talking points in the subsequent slides, but because I've discussed each section, I'll continue on to slide 13. So Sean, if you could please skip to slide 13, that'd be fantastic. Perfect, thank you very much, Sean. So again, to conclude this section, overall, these plans recognize that there are existing strengths in leadership within our communities and across multiple sectors that can be leveraged and engaged to proactively address local priorities related to complex social issues and crime. This is not about reinventing the wheel here. Also, by promoting upstream activities and focusing on social development, prevention, and risk intervention, the framework really works to stop challenges from turning into crises or incidents. Incident response is, of course, a vital piece of the puzzle. It's necessary, but once again, the goal of these plans is to try to be proactive and preventative. Ultimately, the nature of this approach, from its inclusion of diverse voices to the identification of priority risks and strengths, means that these plans should be seen as living documents, documents that can be built over time and adaptable. Also, considering all of these points, our plan, while developed regionally, will include appendices for each municipality. And the intent here is to ensure that local priorities in each municipality are identified. Next slide, please. Now that we have a bit of a background on that CSWB planning framework and process, we'll jump into the second takeaway, current project updates. Next slide, please. So as you may recall, in our last council report to the City and County Council, we provided updates related to the project pause due to COVID-19. In brief, just to recap that report, here are some key highlights. Staff were redeployed between the months of March and June, and really just to emphasize that piece as well, since the core project team consisted of staff from the County of Essex, as well as the City of Windsor and Windsor Police Services, at the time, each organization needed to have a full complement of staffing to deal with the pandemic in the early months. And so that's why redeployment had to occur. That being said, over that intervening time period, letters to AMO and OMSA were written advocating for an extension to this submission deadline to January 1st, 2022. Also, another key piece here was that all project team meetings were put on a pause as our community partners, again, were facing the same challenges that we were facing, and were being taxed with increased workloads and responsibilities. And so we wanted to make sure that we respected the fact that that these community assets were involved equally as much as we were in figuring out how to handle this challenge in the early months. So since that July council report, though, a few key pieces have been completed. The consulting firm Strategy Corp was successfully awarded the contract through an RFP process. And actually, just to add here as well, is that we've had a great partner and champion with CAO, Ms. Evans, who has been a vital member, honestly, in the evaluation team for that RFP process, but also has been involved in the leadership table as a representative of the regional CAOs. Moving from that point as well, we have re-engaged our project teams, our leadership table, as well as our data team, and we have re-engaged our representatives at AMO and OMSA and their working groups. Something to emphasize here with respect to the OMSA working groups is the CSWB working group allows us to really connect with other municipalities in the province who are also completing these plans. And so through those discussions with those other municipalities, we were able to ask questions about what their current status was and what their new timelines looked like. And a few key things became very clear. The first being that we are in a very strong position, as we did not go to public consultation as originally planned in April and May. What I mean by that is early consultations would not have been able to assess the potential impact of the pandemic on individual and community priorities. And so the delay allows us to have an opportunity to ask that in our consultation process, to have a better understanding of what those risk and protective factors were before and after the start of COVID. Also, our requested extension was in line with other municipalities. So consensus was established amongst all the municipalities that a deadline of December 31st, 2021 would be most appropriate for most municipalities. So again, we were one day off on that assertion. So that was great to know. And of course, additionally, AMO and OMSA representatives will be advocating and are advocating for December 31st, 2021 deadline with the Ministry, the Solicitor General. So that was fantastic as well. And the last kind of key piece there was that we are on par with the majority of other municipalities as it pertains to project status. So we're roughly in line or roughly in the middle of the pack in terms of where other municipalities are in terms of the development and completion of this plan. Next slide, please. So in regards to our current status, there are two key deliverables that I'd like to introduce. The first being risk factor data categories, and the second being asset mapping, which I'll discuss in a second. With the help of our data team, comprised of data analysts and stewards from our RSLT member organizations, we were able to synthesize identified risk and protective factor categories into the 7 categories that you see on the screen. And from there, again, we were able to have our consultants really go through publicly available databases to identify indicators related to these, relevant to these categories. When we then consulted our data team through a number of methods to validate and finalize indicators for each category. And something to add here too, I can't say enough about the team at Tecumseh. We had a great opportunity to connect with Christina Hebert, who's on the data team, who was very actively involved in ensuring that that we had more context from a supporting measures perspective of some things that may be important and vital to Tecumseh, but also with respect to some data categories as well, quantitative data categories. And speaking of quantitative and qualitative data, both of those are being collected from a regional and municipal level of analysis. And this is important because the information will be used to form the basis of our current state analysis, as well as inform the development of the online survey and overall support the leadership table and our enhanced sector network, which I'll discuss in a second, but help them in identifying and contextualizing issues. Next slide, please. The second key update here is the asset map. And asset mapping is a key deliverable in the CSWB framework and really will include three key aspects. The first being an existing body inventory. That's that list of existing committees and leadership bodies that we could work with and kind of be able to collaborate with. And this has helped shape the development of the leadership table as well as the enhanced sector network. The second piece is a strategy inventory, and that's a list of existing strategies, plans, strategic plans, and frameworks. And that has been helping in the development of the current state analysis report. And finally, an asset map. And this is really mapping community assets or resources that positively support community efforts. And this really is important because it helps us ensure that existing community strengths and assets across the region are considered when developing recommendations. And so while this is an interactive asset map, so the image of it doesn't do it justice, but this asset map was completed with in partnership with a great team at the City of Windsor's Geomatics Department, as well as in consultation with 211 to collect information from that key database and the County of Essex Geomatics Department as well. We are really, we have a treasure trove of partnerships and of staff here within the region. So this is fantastic that we've been able to work with such great teams. Overall, over 900 assets were actually mapped throughout Windsor and Essex County on this interactive map. Next slide, please. In relation to the town of Tecumseh, again, the asset map is currently being updated. This is based off of, I believe, October the 14th, the last update. But we have requested more data points from our leadership table. And I'm very happy to say that the leadership table really stepped up and was able to provide us with a number of additional points, which is, again, fantastic. But currently, as of that October the 14th date, we identified 62 assets specifically within Tecumseh. And just please note that from the beginning of the development of this, it has been our intent to make this interactive map publicly available. So this is something that we are aiming for and moving towards. We do want to make sure that we're finalizing elements of the map before we get to the point where it can be publicly available. But you'll notice on the left-hand side that there is a list of 10 data categories or 10 overall categories that are used. And then the legend actually includes all of the subcategories within each one of those primary or major main categories. So again, if someone was interested in looking at information from an education standpoint, they could easily look up information about elementary schools, elementary and secondary schools, or secondary schools very quickly. But in addition to that, from a community services standpoint, they could look at Black, Indigenous, and people of color community services under the BIPOC services category. Again, these are ways to improve and really identify the assets that we have in our community, not only from a diversity standpoint, but also from other elements, from health to education to housing. Next slide, please. So for the third takeaway, we'll dive a bit deeper into our project methodologies. Next slide. As I was indicating beforehand, clearly COVID has made an impact on not only on our development of the plan, but also on normal methods of public engagement. And so in consideration of the pandemic and current restrictions, we've opted to move towards a fully online engagement process. But to try to mediate barriers to participation, because not all individuals will have access to online services, we do have dial-in options, as well as creating CSWB toolkits or paper copies of the survey that would be provided to our networks. Overall, our engagement approach has 5 pillars. The first is actually what we're doing today, in ensuring that all elected officials in the region are familiar and informed with the CSWB planning efforts. The second is the enhanced sector network, which I'll be discussing in the next slide. And third and fourth are the public consultation pieces of this, online and print public surveys, as well as virtual town halls. We made sure that because we felt it very important to have an individual session within each municipality. So we made sure that we're going to be conducting 9 sessions across for the county municipalities, and 2 sessions in the city of Windsor. And finally, and lastly, I think this is what's relevant and relates to you all, is virtual focus groups and with CAOs and elected officials for each municipality. You'll also notice the timing of these focus groups are after the public consultation process. And this was purposely done to ensure that data analysis was completed on the virtual town halls and public consultations before reconnecting with you all. We feel that this will be a way for you to all have a review and be able to discuss the latest information that's available. Next slide, please. With respect to the enhanced sector network and tying back to that piece of cultural responsiveness, the purpose here is to leverage existing strategies and leadership within Windsor and Essex County, and to really ensure that there are diverse voices from historically underrepresented communities heard, and also their priorities woven into the process as much as possible. And we feel that this allows us also to contextualize some of that data that we've been talking about, but from multiple population lenses. And so just to be clear, when we are looking at connecting with these groups, we are looking at connecting with representatives of existing committees and community organizations. You'll see before you the 8 broad categories that we will be coordinating, connecting with. And what we're going to be asking members who attend these meetings are really to attend 2 different meetings over the course of the project. The first being in relation to contextualizing that data and providing that qualitative activities that will help us with that contextualization. And the second would be with respect to the prioritization process itself, based on results of the public consultation data analysis. And yes, and so I think with this piece as well, it is very important to know that we understand we would love to have as many people at the table for each of these groups, but we know that that may not be viable from a capacity standpoint, but also from a timing standpoint. So in order to kind of mediate that issue, what we've come up with is what's called an enhanced sector network list, or notification list. So an ESN notification list. And what we've been doing is connecting with not only our leadership table, but we'll be connecting with each CAO across the municipalities or across the region. To request, a list of organizations that they feel should be available or contacted for when the online survey becomes available, as well as when the different virtual town halls become available for that particular municipality. Again, it's a way to ensure that we have as much robust engagement as possible. Next slide, please. So to kind of create that engagement structure in more of a pictorial form, what you'll see if on the bottom, the lower half of this image, you'll see community engagement divided up into 2 sections, general and stratified. Under that general approach, you'll notice again that there is the public consultation pieces, the online and print surveys, and the virtual town halls, and that the consultation results will inform those city and county elected official focus groups. When we're looking at that stratified section, something to note is usually when we're talking about public consultation, there tends to be particular individuals who will more likely self-select to attend some of these meetings. And that's not a bad thing. That's actually something that shows engagement. But some others may be more likely to engage in the process if they have a family member, a friend, or a mentor inform them that this process exists and is occurring. And that's, again, something that would be available and helped through that enhanced sector network. So providing them information about the timing of the town halls and the timing of the online surveys. And that's, again, the reason why that enhanced sector network notification list is helpful, because that is another way of getting the information out. You'll also notice, again, under the stratified piece of presentations to city and county councils, because we do understand how vital you all are in having insights of your community. And so making sure that we include those insights into the planning process is important for us. You'll see above on the upper half of this image is the project team, and it just also denotes responsibility of who is responsible for what. And you'll notice that the consultants will be responsible for the elected official focus groups, and something that you may not be clear, but hopefully is that they will also be the public-facing supports for the public consultations. So they'll be running the virtual town halls, as well as supporting us on delivering the online and print surveys. Next slide, please. So to sum up this process, really, we're looking at an estimated project timeline of about 16 months, and that was considering from June on to November. And we created that timeline with those factors considered relating to COVID-19, as well as that presumed extended deadline of December 31st, 2021. And also simply because there was a need for that greater diversity and inclusion in the planning process. And so that's what we were trying to incorporate with this approach. You'll notice a few key milestones, those being that, again, we're hoping to complete these council presentations. Actually, I should have updated this. It's December 8th would be the last presentation. And that we are looking at having the public consultation period within February, within the month of February. Again, lastly, we're looking to submit the report to city and county councils within the months of September to November. So with that, if you can go to the next slide. Thank you very much for your time and your consideration here. I greatly appreciate it. And if you have any questions, Ms. Birch and I are available for questions.
Well, thank you very much, Leonardo, for certainly the presentation. I've got a couple. When you made reference to the virtual town hall meetings and one per municipality, usually when we have meetings, we usually have 2 in a day, where so that all our participants are able to participate. Some work in the daytime, some work at night, or is it going to be whoever can attend those? And I guess you could make I guess a written submission and so forth. But I want to make sure that we certainly don't leave anybody out that want to be part of. And I understand there's actually, you could say there's 9 governments here. There's 7 municipalities, the county and the city, and the 7 lower tier municipalities that are participating. So I can understand the logistics in terms of how difficult that could be, but that's just a little bit of my concern in terms of some not being able to participate because of shift work or whatever reason. The other is on the, if you want to answer on that one, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I think when we're looking at developing those virtual town hall meetings, we really wanted to include as many individuals and voices as possible. And so we are looking to target those meetings for afternoons. Something that we are additionally looking at as well was, quite frankly, since this is all virtual, we're not at a physical location, there may be opportunities for other individuals to attend other meetings. And so there will be an opportunity to provide a descriptor of what municipality is most important to you. We are, though, I think primarily wanting to make sure that as many residents from, for instance, for Tecumseh, attend the Tecumseh meeting so that we can keep all that information in one location as possible, as much as possible. That being said, we are hoping that online engagement through the survey process allows for people to provide their information at multiple times. And that's why we're looking at an extended time period for that online survey participation, because it's essentially going to be a 6-week process. So we are looking to see how we may be able to do that, but I will take your thoughts into consideration as well as we're moving forward and discussing opportunities with the consultants.
Any other, just a supplementary to that one, Leonard, would it be out of context if you know, the demand for these meetings that say the town itself, you know, could have an addendum where we could have a meeting with our community just to make, you know, and then add that to whatever information the whole region could be, you know, it could be brought to the whole region. I think that's another outlet as well, is that because of logistics, I get it on the other side, but maybe an individual meeting follow up from that if there's some general interest. If the public are saying, geez, you know, because we hear it and say, yeah, that's great, it's the afternoon, but I'm working and I can't participate and so forth. So if we could do, you know, a municipality like Tecumseh and say, you know what, next week we're going to do one for us just to catch up or catch those who weren't able to attend on the original one. Just, I don't need an answer tonight, but I know I know our CAO sits on the leadership table, but that's something you can bring up, I think, at some point. If logistically it's a bad thing, I mean, it's okay. You know, I can handle that and so forth. The other just a question as well is when you go to the individual councils or county council or the individual council, and you're going to have that opportunity to talk with the CAOs. Is there any opportunity there as well where our police services board can participate with that? I think they should be there. I didn't see anything in there. Maybe I missed it, but because obviously they play a big role because they are our liaison, you know, between the police service and certainly the council and certainly the residents.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for that question. Again, I think with respect to the Police Services Board, I think that's a great point. We have been looking at ways to engage them. We've actually received from each of the municipalities a list of members on those police service boards as well, in terms of that engagement process. And we do have Detachment Commander Glenn Miller on our leadership table. And we are looking to have the best way of engaging each police board, but that is currently in talks in terms of how we would be approaching consultation in that regard. But yes, this is definitely on our radar because we understand how important those police service boards are for each municipality and for the region.
Okay, thank you for that. Members of council, any questions on the presentation or questions you want to bring forward to both our delegates? Councillor Altenhoff.
Thank you, Worship, and through you, you know, my thanks to Mr. Gill and Ms. Birch for attending this evening and the presentation. I would echo your point, Mr. Mayor, certainly on the input from residents, police services boards, and or you know any other vein or appropriate piece of information. We're in this seems to be, or it's in the planning phase. So this is really where we should be striving and working hardest to receive that input and correspondingly, you know, distill it afterwards. So I really would like to emphasize and echo that. One other point, it seems that the genesis for all of this was the fact that community safety was evolving and the needs for safety was evolving over time and changing. So I guess the one point that I just want to articulate, and I appreciate the CSWB framework that you've presented so far, but I think we have to take the genesis for why we're doing all of this and integrate perhaps mechanisms for continuous improvement and really feedback into the system so that as time evolves, this community safety and well-being plan will evolve as well. I know that's perhaps maybe very challenging to achieve, but I think if you can have some of those concepts of continuous feedback and improvement into it, that would be great, because really that's perhaps the reason why we're here and discussing this. And if we could integrate these concepts into that, that framework, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you to the councillor. Thank you very much for that question, councillor. Absolutely. And I believe a key piece here, and something that I was indicating prior to, was the emphasis of it being a living document, the need to be adaptable, the need to be using this data to support future strategies. Something to note with this is we are currently in that planning process, as you highlighted as well. And when it comes down to the implementation piece, that would be something that would need to be done after the endorsement of the plan. But we're trying to do as much as possible is to actually include into that planning process, bake into that process elements of continual feedback and updating. Right? Something even with respect to the asset mapping, for instance, as you know, there may be different changes of what assets are available in the community. So elements like that are important for us to understand how we may be able to update and inform our process moving forward. And that's something that we hope to do through this, through the development of the plan.
Any other questions or certainly comments from members at this stage? No. Well, you've done such a great job in certainly explaining your what's been done to date. And certainly on behalf of all of us around the screen, we want to take this opportunity to thank you, Mr. Gill, and Ms. Birch for bringing this report before us, and certainly want to echo and also our CAO and being part of the leadership team as well. And I really am a firm believer that I don't know about other regions what they're doing, but I think as a joint effort with both the county and the city together, I think is a critical piece, I think, because there's so many of the integrated services that were co-joined, whether it's in social housing and social services and many others, whether it's public health, just to name a few. And those are all key components in being part of developing, I think, a sound community safety plan. So I'm very pleased in terms of when it was suggested at the time, and I think the outcome, I think, will be I think a very, very good plan for us. So once again, on behalf of all of us and certainly our residents in the town of Tecumseh, thank you again, and continue the good work. And we'll look forward, as it was echoed by Councillor Altenhoff, the evolution of the plan and when it's ready for implementation. So good luck to all.
Thank you all. Thank you for having me.
All right, have a good evening. Not for members of council, you're still on the hook for some.